The Indianapolis 500 is one of motorsport's greatest events. First began in 1911 and, unless you're a NASCAR fan, it's got to be regarded as America's biggest race. It's largely been the domain of homegrown talent, or at least teams and drivers contesting the usual IndyCar series, but every now and again there's been an invasion from Formula One. In particular, an invasion in the 1960s changed IndyCar racing forever. This is a short view back to the past on when F1 conquered the Indy 500.
Gentlemen, a short view back to the past.
To give the Formula One World Championship a global feel when it began, the Indy 500 was included in the schedule. Although Grand Prix cars had been successful there, very few teams bothered to make the trip, with the exception of Alberto Ascari and Ferrari in 1952. Ironically, it wasn't until the Indy 500 was dropped from the World Championship schedule that the leading British F1 teams started to take a look at it. In 1961, reigning world champions Cooper and Jack Brabham, then struggling with the new 1500cc regulations in Formula One, decided to enter the Indy 500. The car had an enlarged engine and various modifications to the suspension and chassis, though it was still ostensibly a Cooper Formula One car. Cooper had already triggered the rear-engined, or more specifically mid-engined revolution in Formula One, so it was perhaps fitting that they were the ones to go across first. Also predictably, the Cooper was miles faster than the front-engine roadsters through the corners and miles slower on the straights. Brabham took a little while to get his head round the way that racing worked at the Indy 500, but gradually worked his way up the field. He was set for a top 6 finish, but tyre problems — he was the only Dunlop runner against a field of Firestones — meant that he had to make an extra stop, and he ended up 9th, which he was very pleased about. Interestingly, Brabham did not believe that rear-engine cars were the way to go for the Indy 500 or Indy cars generally. But Dan Gurney had other ideas. The American racer invited Colin Chapman, Lotus boss and designer, to come to the 1962 running of the Indy 500, and the result were 2 Lotus 29s entered for the 1963 race. The 29 was based on the Lotus 25, which Clark would take to that year's Formula One world title, but it had a 4.2 litre Ford V8 instead of a 1500cc Climax V8. The lighter and more agile Lotuses now had some proper power to go with their fine handling. They were also more efficient and could go through the race on just 2 stops instead of 3 for most of the front-engine roadsters, and at one stage they ran 1st and 2nd. Gurney ended up 7th, but Clark chased Parnelli-Jones for the victory. There was controversy because Parnelli-Jones in the Watson-Offenhauser was leaking oil but didn't get a black flag. He was therefore able to run home the winner with Clark 2nd. Clark did go on to win at Milwaukee later in the year. That victory, combined with his 2nd place at the Indy 500, was actually enough to give him 6th in the IndyCar Championship standings, despite the fact he only entered 3 of the 12 rounds. Perhaps unsurprisingly, given the pace of the Lotuses in 1963, there were many more rear-engine cars on the 1964 entry list. This time, Clark, in a Lotus 34, took pole position, but was thwarted because of tyre issues that eventually forced the suspension to break. AJ Foyt took victory in a front-engine roadster, but it would be the last time that such a car was victorious at the Indy 500. Most cars had the engine behind the driver for the 1965 race, and it all came together for Clark and Lotus. In an event that Clark himself described as perfect, he started 2nd and led 190 of the 200 laps. The Lotus pit stops, which had been a weakness in 1963, were brilliant, and he took the flag nearly 2 minutes clear of Jones and top rookie Mario Andretti. It was the first time a rear-engine car had won the Indy 500, and Clark was the first person to average 150 miles an hour across the 500 miles. Clark's great rival Graham Hill would win the 1966 event in a Lola with Clark 2nd. The Indy 500 had well and truly been conquered. Now, we don't want to give the impression that we're attacking the Indy establishment, so look out for a future video on when IndyCar conquered F1. If you like this video, please remember to click the like and subscribe buttons, and look out for more great videos on Motorsport TV. And in the comments, please do let us know if there are any other motorsport tales you'd like us to look at in future.